We're in Carbondale now.
In Eddie's house on Jordan's birthday, 2003.
Right.
Just sit up.
Now tell me about your extended family a little bit. Start with your grandparents.
Well, I was the closest to my grandpa Weber. His name was Edward. They were named after him. And tragically, his wife, my grandmother Etta, died at the age of 53 in an automobile accident. The Benyas grandparents I never knew. Grandma Sarah died in 1919 before I was born.
Also an auto accident.
Also an auto accident. Both grandmas lost in auto accidents, and I don't remember Grandpa Benyas. If he saw me or I saw him, I don't remember. I don't remember, but I was very close. I do have a lot of recollections with my the Weber grandma Etta, because I think we lived just a few doors away, and I'd go there after school, get cookies and milk.
What did you? Was that on Pingree?
No, way before that. I'm not sure what street. Probably Elmhurst. I know we had a house in Elmhurst.
What house were you born in?
I was born in Omaha, Nebraska, but I was a baby.
And what was do you remember the first house you were in Detroit? Your family?
No, I don't really know where I was. I was probably just a little kid. I know that it was some kind of a flat, because it was like a two-story. We were either the second story or the first story. And mainly interested in baseball. Baseball was my big thing.
Now tell me about the Webers were your mother's parents.
Right.
And that she had, how many were in her family sibling-wise?
Well, she had 3 brothers.
Rudy,
Julie, and Art.
And what were their wives' names?
Julie was married to Gert. Art was married to Miriam, and Rudy was married to Sally.
Did they have kids?
Yeah, they had children. I was probably the closest to the children of Art, because I grew up with my cousin Pat. She's about 5 years younger than I am. She just had her 75th birthday. We had a cottage in Canada, and I have real good recollections of a summer on the cottage on Lake St. Clair. It was in a town called Bell River. Played mainly with Pat, and then she had a brother Skippy, who was younger. I played a little bit with him. But Rudy and Julie had younger children, and I was probably either older or off to the Army by the time they were at an age when they could play. I'm still close with my cousin Richard, who was Rudy and Sally's son. He's a physician.
He's the only child, right?
He's the only child, right?
And
he married an only child, so they had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. But they have no cousins, Richard sort of feels that Don and me are his brothers.
So that Richard is Rudy's son.
Yeah, right.
And what about Julie?
Well, Julie had a boy and a girl, Marlene, and Ronnie, but they moved to Florida, I think, probably right after the war. So I knew them as children, but then after they moved to Florida, I really didn't see much of them.
So that's Ron Weber.
Ron Weber.
Marlene Weingarten.
No.
Marlene.
No, that's on. Darlene is on the Benyas side. She was a Rice. No, Marlene married a guy, I don't know his name. They live somewhere in Miami. I haven't seen him in 40 years.
So Marlene and Ron, and then Dick, and then Pat and Skippy.
Right.
So basically you had 5 cousins on Grandma Pearl's side.
That's right.
Okay, now, tell me about Grandpa Saul's sibling.
Well, on the Benyas side, probably Dean and Sue, which are Ralph and Ann's children.
Mm-hmm.
I was the closest to. There were a couple of cousins my age. My Aunt Pearl married a man by the name of Jackman. He was an optometrist.
Murray Jack.
Murray Jackman. They had 2 boys,
But let's go
Sherwood
the,
and Bruce. But they left for California during the war, and I never saw them again.
didn't Sherwood didn't one of the Jackmans die in the war?
No. That was Darlene's brother. Their name was Rice,
Uh-huh.
and they married Ida, my dad's sister Ida, but she died of cancer, I think even before I went in the service, so probably about 41 or 42. And then Rice remarried, but he raised these 2 boys and a girl, and one of them, I think Seymour was his name, was a submariner,
Mm-hmm.
and was lost.
Yeah.
Never heard of again.
Because we were actually, Karen and I were in San Francisco a couple months ago, and there's a memorial to all the U.S. submarines that were lost.
Oh,
And I didn't know which one he was on.
no, I don't.
But you can look him up, I guess. But his name is
Rice.
Seymour Rice.
Seymour Rice, yeah. There was another brother, I can't think of his name. I was not close with them. Now my uncle Rice was in the Merchant Marine, a career Merchant Marine man.
The one who married Ida.
Married Ida, right? And they lived in different cities. I didn't know those kids growing up.
So
Never saw them.
Grandpa Saul, I think, was the third in his family, right?
Right.
And the
Morris
oldest was
didn't have any
Morris.
children, and Hannah didn't have any children.
Morris married
Mildred,
Morris and Mildred. Okay.
right?
And then Hannah married.
Hannah married late in life.
Mhm.
She married a guy, I can't think of his name. He was a Holocaust survivor. And they lived in Chicago.
She's buried in Chicago, isn't
Right,
she?
she's buried in Chicago. They didn't have any children. And then my dad had 3, of course.
Now, Uncle Morris, where's he buried?
Morris is at Clover Hill,
Uh-huh.
in Royal Oak,
Right.
with the rest of the family.
And Hannah.
Hannah's in Chicago. I don't know where Rice is buried.
That's Ida, you mean?
Ida is married in Clover Hill.
Oh, is it?
She's next to Morris and Mildred. They bought a bunch of graves there.
Okay. So we have Morris, and then Hannah, and then Grandpa Saul,
Right.
and then who's after that?
Well, one of their siblings died young,
Walter.
Walter, but I think he might have come after my dad. But I'm
Oh.
not sure, because he died maybe around 20.
Yeah.
And then after that was...
How'd he die?
They say that he went swimming up north, which was very cold, and got pneumonia. But that had to be very early, maybe around World War I.
Yeah.
Sometime in there. That 1919 sort of, I've seen the grave, and I think it's
Yeah.
1919.
He's buried in Petoskey with
He's
his
buried in Petoskey with his parents.
parents. Yeah.
Uh,
David and
Sarah.
Sarah.
Right. And then after that is Ralph, Aaron, and Mort.
Right.
And Mort was born in 1913. He was 10 years older than me. And of course his mother died early, and he was bounced around. He went to live with his sister Pearl, who was older, married Jackman for a while. I think he might have lived with us for some time.
So his father didn't raise him?
Apparently his father didn't raise him. I don't know why. I don't know the story. I never found out the story. And that affected his life. He had problems.
He was a bright guy, wasn't he?
He was very bright, very knowledgeable in the Civil War, was an optometrist. And he had 3 children. He had David, who worked for IBM, Sarah, who married Rob Carr, and he also worked for IBM. He's with another computer company, and Leonard. Leonard never married. David has a boy and a girl, and Sarah Lynn has 2 girls. But I haven't seen much of them. They moved away, David to Raleigh and Sarah Lynn somewhere in New York. I'm not sure where she lives now. But the Benyases were never as close as the Webbers. Webbers, we always had holidays together, we're always together. You know, all the Seders. Hardly ever saw the Benyases. The only one I remember seeing at a Seder as Morris and Mildred, because they didn't have any family. And they'd be invited to our house for a Seder.
And who were Aaron's kids?
Aaron had only one kid, Wally. But Aaron, moved to California. His wife died. He moved to California, lived in San Diego, and I didn't see much of them. The only Benyas.
Well, you have a good story though about Uncle Aaron and the contact lenses, don't you?
Yeah, well, he was an optometrist in the early days of contacts. He knew that I wore glasses. He called me in one day and said, coming to his little optometry store in Dearborn, he wanted to show me contacts. But he had a shake, and he would try to go to my eye, and he was trying to put this thing in my eye, and I said, forget it. And
there were 3 optometrists, Morris and Aaron and who was the other one?
And Mort. Well, they were very tough times. This is pre-World War II. Morris being the oldest, he went to Northern Illinois to study optometry, and I think it was 10 months. That's all that they studied to become an optometrist. Aaron went to law school. I'm not sure where he went to law school, but he couldn't make a living as a lawyer. There just wasn't any work.
Mm-hmm.
And then Morris either sent them or paid for them. I'm not sure. Both Aaron and Mort. So they all became optometrists. I don't think any of them were very successful. The very successful one was Murray Jackman. He apparently made a great deal of money.
As an optometrist?
Yeah, as an optometrist. But I think he was dealing in diamonds and a lot of stuff, and he owned a lot of property. They had a big home in Palmer Woods, 3-story house, really a small mansion. And I played with their sons a little bit, Bruce and Sherwood. But then they decided to move to California, and I think they gave up Judaism. When I heard that they became Episcopalians or something like that.
Aren't they in something like Ojai, California?
I don't know. I got a letter once from, I think Bruce has passed away, and he was a doctor. I think he was a DO. Sherwood, I'm not sure what he did. The Benyas children used to get together at a cottage that Uncle Ralph had. Uncle Ralph had a cottage in Michigan, and I didn't go very often, but probably Labor Day or 4th of July, and all the Benyas kids were there. And of course, Sherwood and I were the oldest. I didn't have a lot to do with them. I had my own friends, mainly on Elmhurst, when I was teenage years.
Well, do you remember, besides living in Elmhurst, do you remember living anywhere else in Detroit?
Yeah, we lived for a short time on a street.
San Juan.
Well, no, that was later. My parents lived on San Juan. I never lived on San Juan. No, we lived on Calvert, and the interesting thing on Calvert was I went to a big school. There were 3 schools in one piece of property. Elementary school, intermediate school, and a high school, and Shirley went there too. She went to their high school. She went to a different elementary and middle school. But we were right on the actual school property with a fence by the alley. And in the summer, I would buy pop. My grandfather arranged for me to buy pop. I think I paid 2 cents a bottle. And men played softball or 10 softball fields. So I sold pop in the summertime and made pretty good money. I think I sold it for a nickel. I bought it for 2 cents, sold it for a nickel. Had to buy ice and had a wagon. And I worked for a couple hours. I probably made $10 or $20.
It's during the Depression, wasn't it?
This was during the Depression, yeah.
Now, they played softball?
They played softball.
Not baseball?
Not hardball, no. So I did that. And then I think when I was 15, I got a job in the summer as a runner for an optometry store. There was a lab that actually made the glasses. I worked, I think Uncle Maurice got me the job because he was downtown Detroit. And most of the optometrists were in professional buildings in downtown Detroit. And there was one lab called Schulte and Fox, and they actually made the glasses. So they needed a runner to go around and pick up the orders from the optometrists, take them to the lab, and then when the glasses were made, take them back. So I had a little route downtown where I would kind of run and back and forth, and I made I don't know, maybe $15, $20 a week doing that. That was a summer job. And then when I went to high school, I got a job selling shirts in a men's shirt store called United Shirt. That was really still in the Depression, you know, late 30s by then. I think ties were like a quarter, and shirts were probably $5, and you know. But I went after school. I didn't do much studying. I pretty much worked because the family needed the money. I took my money home and gave it to my mother. I didn't keep any money.
What schools did you go to? What was your elementary school and all?
Well, I went to Roosevelt, Durfee, Central, and then when we moved...
Wait a minute, Roosevelt was elementary?
Elementary. Durfee was intermediate. And then
Central High School.
Central High School.
Where's that?
It's called Central because it was like in the middle of Detroit. Well, if you could draw some cross lines with Detroit, that would be the middle, and that's why it was called Central High School. But then when my family moved to Pingree, I was just out of the area, and I had to go to Northwestern. They wouldn't let me continue.
You graduated from Northwestern?
I graduated from Northwestern.
Your last year in high school?
2 years, I think 11th and 12th grade in high school was at Northwestern, which was becoming black. At Central there were like 1 or 2 black families, but Northwestern was predominantly black, and there was a race riot in, I think with 41 or 42 maybe.
You graduated in 42?
I graduated in 42, and I went to Wayne University, but I was only there 1 semester and I was drafted.
So, where were you living when you were going to Central?
Calvert.
Oh, that was Calvert.
That was Calvert, and and then we moved to Pingree.
So Elmhurst.
My father never owned a house. He always rented, and apparently he ran out of money and had to move. We moved a lot.
Yeah.
We had apartments and different places, and the only thing they never talked about it, but the only thing I could figure out is that because I know we had nice places. I remember, I had my own room. Don and Mickey were small. Don is 7 years younger, and Eddie Gale is 6 years younger than that. So they were much younger than me. But we all had our own room. I never had to sleep with Don. I don't think so. I think when I came back from the Army, I shared a room with Don for a while. But I was only home a short time, and I decided to go to Chicago and study photography, and I went to the Institute of Design.
Okay, I want to talk about that. Tell me about, after the war ended, you were in India.
Right.
You had, I think you were a sergeant.
Right. Well, I started out as a private, and then I was sent to photo school, and I graduated from photo school. They made me a corporal. And then I worked in Virginia at an air base for a while, and then I was shipped overseas, and I went to Karachi, which was a photo lab, and we had fighter planes there, and the main thing that we were doing was there were a camera called a gun sight aiming point camera. It was installed in the airplane, and it took, every time you fired the machine guns in the airplane, it took pictures. So we had mechanics that installed the cameras in the wings, and then I was in charge of the lab developing the film. It was almost like movie film. It was a little cassette of 16 millimeter film, and we had a big machine, and I had to make the chemistry, and I did that. And then I also did PR photography. I did photograph people getting medals, and you know, airplanes that were damaged. It's about the same thing I'm still doing. You know, just general PR photography. And then when the war ended, I was sent to Calcutta to a what was called the air depot. Calcutta, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's where all the supplies were. And the supplies were all over the place. They were in Tibet, you know, in China, and they were all coming in to the base. And we had a captain in charge, we had a warrant officer, we had a master sergeant, a staff sergeant, and me as a corporal. They all went home, made me a sergeant, put me in charge. I was in charge of this whole great big place. And mainly I was like a clerk. I just had to, you know, bring in all these supplies. And I was there for, I'm trying to think, about 6 months, and then I was sent home.
Did you have Indian workers?
Yeah, I had a lot of Indian workers, maybe 100.
And you were the only soldier there?
I was the only soldier there. Yeah. No, they didn't bother me. They listened to me. I had one guy that spoke English that I, you know, sort of, you know, the major domo, and I would tell him what I wanted about stacking things or counting things, and he would tell the other Indians who didn't speak English.
What did they speak?
I think the language is called Urdu, and I never learned. I learned a few words, but I don't remember them.
You know, when McGovern was here, and I heard him speak about a week ago, he said that you know, he was flying missions in Germany, and when the war was over, they were all entitled to go back, but he said the general in charge said that he wanted to. He didn't want to take a single supply back to the United States,
right?
Because the people were so poor and desolate, and so he asked for volunteers for people to fly over and take supplies. Did you do any of that with the supplies that you had in your theater?
No, I'm not sure what happened to what supplies we had. I thought we should, you know, there were photo shops in town that didn't have film and paper, and I thought we should do that, but they said no, I was not allowed to do that, that would affect the economy. So what I heard was that they just put a lot of that supplies in barges and took it out in the Indian Ocean and sunk it. And
okay.
Nothing, as far as I know, nothing was returned home. Now we had a lot of cameras, and many officers would come and try to take cameras. And I was a sergeant, and you know, I said I have to account for all this stuff. You know, you can't. But they were officers, and a lot of them got cameras. I didn't get anything. I was not allowed to take home anything.
Did you have any contact with any of the British troops there in India?
I saw the British troops early in the war. I talked to them, and they hated us. They didn't like it. We were making probably 3 times the money they were making, and they'd been there for hundreds of years, and did nothing with the Indians but abused them. It was really terrible. And when the Americans came in, we set up dispensaries if they had injuries where they could go for their wounds. The British didn't care whether they got hurt or not. There were no hospitals. Americans set up all kind of things like that.
Did you have any contact with any of the British or American troops who had been in combat?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't remember ever talking to anybody that had. The pilots had flown missions in Germany and were coming to study tactics to fight in Japan. But I didn't really get to talk you know, one-on-one. The officers and the enlisted men were separated. We even had, you couldn't have a beer with them there. We had a place where we went for beer, and the officers had the officers club, and you never, all you did was salute. You didn't really talk to officers. I was very young, so I was not very knowledgeable about anything. I just sort of did what I was told, like a lot of guys, you know. But I had good friends, really good friends in India. I had Merwin Kirk, who was another photographer, and there was a guy named Jack Beanstalk, who had a studio in New York, a little older than me. Had a studio in New York. I went to visit him after the war. And Kirk lived in Rochester, New York. Went to visit him, and he had a little studio. And we corresponded for a while, and then we stopped, and we didn't.
What about the pilots and airmen who flew the missions that with the gun sight aiming point camera?
Well,
you had any contact with them?
Well, see, that was training. They weren't. They were shooting at targets or something, and they were single. They were single cockpit planes. They were P-40s, P-38s. So I never had a ride in one. You know.
So these cameras weren't. I thought they were used on combat missions to assess whether they hit the target.
They were. But in training, the only way you would know if you hit a target was through the camera, because you couldn't see the bullets. Now I think what I remember, every 7th bullet was a tracer bullet, which means it kind of glowed. And that's what you would pick up in the film. And you could see if it hit a target. But this was strictly training. I mean, they had been in combat in England and in Europe, but I didn't talk to any of them. I never asked them.
Yeah. Did you, what would have happened to you if the Japanese hadn't surrendered? Preparing for the invasion of Japan, what would your role have been?
Well, by that time, I had enough points to come home. You had points, and I don't remember how they worked it, but it had to do with your length of service. I was there just under 3 years. Now, if the Japanese hadn't surrendered, I might have been either asked or told to re-enlist, and then I might have been sent to that area. But I was still in India when they dropped the bomb, and the war was over, so it was within a month I was sent home.
So you stayed after the, you stayed, I thought you stayed till 46.
No. 40...
November 45 or something?
I think so, 45, yeah, November 45. 46, I was already at the Institute of Design in Chicago, summer 46. So I came home probably early 46, if I remember.
What's the first thing you did when you went home? I mean, what kind of things?
Yeah, well, it was kind of strange. There were... Okay, is that all right?
Yeah, I'm going to check something.
For some reason, I didn't think
I think
about...
it's okay.
I didn't think about going back to Wayne University. I didn't want to do that, I guess. And I thought what I thought I would do was do some photography, whatever I could do. And I did a little bit in the neighborhood. I got a couple of assignments from the newspapers. I did a little photography for the newspapers.
You're living at home?
I was living at home, yeah. Now, that was on Pingree. Yeah, that was still Pingree. I had a dark room in the basement. And I was doing pretty good. And I met other photographers, and my life evolved around photography. And then there was quite a famous photographer from Detroit who went to Chicago and was the head of the photo department at the Institute of Design. His name was Arthur Siegel. And he had a younger brother, Bunny was called, and he knew me, and he said, my dad is teaching photography at a school, and they had a summer seminar with very famous photographers coming, not just to give a talk, but to 2 or 3 days. And it was like 10 weeks in summer, like July and August, part of September. So I thought that'd be pretty interesting, because I had heard some of these names. I didn't know a lot about them, but I heard some of these names, and I knew they were big-time photographers. So I thought, well, that'd be kind of neat. I applied for a GI Bill, and I got money to live on, and my tuition was paid. And I liked the school, I liked the people, so I stayed there till I graduated at the Institute of Design.
And that was on Dearborn, Ontario, right?
Dearborn, Ontario, in that big building, which was used to be the, I think it was the Chicago Cultural Center at one time, before it became a school. Before I got there, the Institute of Design, actually when I first got there, they were on a second floor off of some office buildings. They just had a couple of rooms, and Moholy Nagy, who was a very famous artist, came there to start this school. It was supposed to be the new Bauhaus. And there was a Bauhaus in Germany, which was the foremost art school. And he got funding from some wealthy Chicago people, but it was a very small school, and then maybe 50 students. But then when they started coming in with the GI Bill, there was about 200. Maybe more, a little more, but I don't think so, about 200. And we had really good teachers, and then I studied things like sculpture and drawing and painting and art history and music appreciation, you know, and design, and I liked it, so I stayed there.
How many years were you there?
I was there 3 years, graduated in 3 years, got some credit for my courses at Wayne, and the summer, I got credit, so it was like 3.5 years.
So what year did you finish there? 49?
49. Yeah. And then I was recruited by a firm called the L.A. Darling Company out of Coldwater, Michigan. They came to school. They were looking for a photographer to photograph. They made mannequins and store displays, chrome store. They had a guy taking pictures, but he was not really a photographer. He was more of a design person, but he knew how to take pictures. So they wanted a real photographer. They came to me and offered me a job. I think I made $100 a week to start.
By the way, where'd you live in Chicago?
Chicago, well, that's kind of interesting. I lived on North Avenue, and I lived with a big rooming house that my Aunt Sally's aunt had, and she had a son my age. Can't think of his name right now. And we shared a bedroom. And that's where I lived the whole 3 years. I paid them rent.
Where was it on North Avenue?
I can't remember.
Far from the lake, or?
Yeah. I took a streetcar, I think.
Took a streetcar to get to the
I
school.
took a Clark. Was there a streetcar in Clark? Something like that. And it was like 2600 north. That kind of rings a bell.
North is, I think, 1600 north, actually. North Avenue is 1600 north.
No, it was beyond. No, wait. It wasn't on North Avenue. North Avenue was a cross street, right? No. I don't remember.
So you were 2600 North Clark, that area?
Something like that.
Clark
it wasn't Clark, but it was...
That's near Diversity.
Yeah, right, okay, it was near Diversity, I remember that, yeah. And then I got a little car, because I had a business in a bowling alley.
In Chicago?
Yeah. There was a bowling alley called the Peterson Bowling Alley. They had contests, and they always photographed. The joke was you photograph a guy with his ball. And I had a setup where I would, there were like 50 men would come in to bowl on a certain day, and they had a big poster at the Peterson Classic in the year, and they had a weighing machine to be sure the ball was kosher, that it was exact weight, that there wasn't anything funny about it.